As we go to press tonight, it appears that Elon Musk's purchase of the Twitter hate machine is all but a done deal. The board and the shareholders have agreed to the deal in principle, and there's nothing left now but for the lawyers to dot the I's and cross the T's, apparently. And as you might expect, our friends on the left have reacted to this news in the same calm, rational, reflective way that they react to most things. No, wait, that's not right. They're actually screaming and wailing and gnashing their teeth and rending their garments, threatening to move to Canada or commit suicide, or both, not necessarily in that order. And let's stop here for a quick reminder, a brief restatement of what's actually taking place here. I may have belabored the point last Monday, but I think it's a point that bears belaboring. All that has happened here is that a guy bought a website. And to the people who are shrieking unintelligible nonsense noises at the sky right now because they think this certain guy buying this certain website portends the imminent collapse of Western civilization, I would love the opportunity to ask one of those people, how is this going to make your Twitter experience so much different and in a bad way that you're reacting to it with a level of grief that normal people reserve for when their loved ones perish? I wonder if they've even taken the time to think about it in practical terms, but probably not, because when you're a hardcore Twitter tweeter, it rewires your brain, and it makes you into a dumbass, and it makes you a rage addict. Being a hardcore Twitter tweeter, especially in the radical identitarian leftist blue check mafia crowd, it reduces you to living this empty, miserable, worthless life where you just drift from one rage-gasm to the next. You jump through all the virtue signal hoops that you're told to jump through, and damn it, you were the first one who replaced your I hate anti-vaxxers profile pic with a Ukrainian flag profile pic. You hate all the things and all the people you are instructed to hate, and you hate them with a deep, burning, visceral, white-hot intensity that brooks no quarter, no compromise, and especially no conversation. So, is that what the denizens of the Twitter hate machine are really afraid of? Are they afraid by some freak algorithmic coincidence that they might see a tweet from a non-like-minded tweeter? Because, look, personally, I've never used the damn thing, I never will, but I'm pretty sure you can block people on Twitter. I'm pretty sure it's going to remain sufficiently customizable as an experience that you can fashion any sort of cartoonishly self-affirming echo chamber that you like. The only limit is your own lack of imagination and your crippling intellectual insecurity. Well, and the fact that years of constant social media use have turned your brain into tapioca pudding. So, even though their own everyday Twitter experience doesn't have to change really in any appreciable way just because the company's being sold and taken private, they still scream and wail and act like this is the single worst thing that's ever happened in their lives. Somehow, just the knowledge that Twitter is no longer rigidly censored along political lines, just the knowledge that it's now going to be owned by the world's richest African American, is enough to inspire paroxysms of emotional bedwetting, and probably physical bedwetting wouldn't surprise me too from some of these people, if I'm being honest. So, even though the Twitter you actually see on your own feed is going to be indistinguishable from before, the fact that the rest of Twitter, the part you never see and don't have any reason to care about, the fact that the whole thing is no longer rigged and censored to benefit people who think all the same things you do, well, that fact becomes intolerable. And you know what other group this reminds me of? The face diaper fascists. The people who are not content just to wear their double, triple masks and their plastic face shield and their surgical gloves and their full-body hazmat suit. Because, as most people know who are not clinically insane, if you festoon yourself with all that stupid crap and it actually works as well as you claim to think it does, then you should have no reason to care whether anyone else in your environs is similarly face-muzzled. Not to mention anybody who takes their face masking that seriously. You know they're probably also double vaxxed and quadruple boosted, but that person, I don't want to say they're happy because such people are incapable of happiness, but they are at their least bitter and miserable, let's put it that way, when there's a draconian government mandate and everybody is forced to don the obedience muzzle. And when somebody slips up and accidentally exposes their naked visage, it is that person, the obsessive triple masker face shield wearer who plays the hall monitor and starts yelling at people. So the mandate gives them power. And power is seductive, especially when you're a loser douchebag hypochondriac. It's the power to say, look at me. Look at how many masks I have got on, so obviously I am the one who should be policing the mask mandate scofflaws around here. But you take away the mandate, then you're just some loser with a bunch of stupid masks on, and you stand out from the crowd because you look like an idiot. You've looked like an idiot these past 2 years and 2 months, and you never had any power. You were just some screaming loser hypochondriac who ruined everybody's night. And you went home, and you felt virtuous about it. So there you go. You had your 2 years of neurotic, government-approved power and glory. And now you get to reap the whirlwind of normalcy. And you know, Jim Eagle, I imagine if we dug down into the demographic data, we might find that there's a significant overlap between whiny, self-important, blue-check Twitter tweeters and whiny, self-important face diaper fascists. In fact, if I was a betting man, I might propose they are all exactly the same people. Damn it, I guess that makes me a conspiracy theorist, doesn't it? From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where it seems like a bit of cruel gender inequity that you can buy a Choco Taco from the ice cream truck, but not a Choco Caco. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant, and business has just picked up in the past few minutes because President Donald Trump just moments ago says he is not going back to Twitter, even if he is offered reinstatement. And look, ladies and gentlemen, I do try to avoid overloading the program with dick jokes whenever possible, but sometimes there just is not a fitting alternative. And oh man, I think Trump just made Twitter's stock price go from erect to flaccid. Like the thing that happens when you think Scarlett Johansson has invited you to bed, but you turn on the lights and you see Rosie O'Donnell arrayed before you in all her grotesqueness. That is what Trump just did to Twitter's stock price rally, which it's a very alpha male move on Trump's part, I think, and I'm really just spitballing my raw reactions here because I literally have just heard about it, and even though it possibly is just a bit of macho posturing on his part, it still is fitting that Trump should be the guy to make or break Twitter's fortunes because he already was that guy anyway. A lot of people forget, because hardly anyone mentions it anymore, that between the day Trump came down the golden escalator and the day Twitter banned his account, their stock price more than tripled. Twitter was widely seen as a declining company in late 2014, early 2015, and it was. The stock was trading around $18, just languishing in the same little window, not doing much of anything, and it starts really gaining momentum only when Trump becomes the Republican nominee and publicly credits Twitter for being a vehicle whereby he can circumvent the fake news media and speak directly to the voters. And look, I am as anti-Twitter as they come. I wear as a badge of honor the fact that my next tweet will be my first one, but I will be the first to volunteer the fact that Twitter in 2016 was integral to American democracy, because the guy who won could not have won without the tweeting. And I think the way he used Twitter while in office as president was an innovative and forward-looking use of emerging technology, just as Franklin Roosevelt was the first world leader to see the potential of using radio broadcasting to communicate with the individual citizen on an unprecedentedly national scale. Trump used the emerging technology of his own day not only to meet the individual citizen where he lives, but to circumvent and obviate the need for a corrupt and dishonest fake news media. So to the extent that Twitter went from being a culturally irrelevant company trading at $18 a share to being the de facto public square of the entire Western Hemisphere and being sold at a price of $54.20, the man who did that is named Donald Trump. And I think this announcement from him today is his fun little way of reminding everybody. When it comes right down to it, if they do offer to reinstate his account, I would be shocked if he didn't accept. And it would be really dumb politically for him not to. The guys who own Twitter were desperately trying to find a way to avoid selling to Elon Musk, and let's talk about why that is. Because Musk basically made them a mafia offer here. The premium per share was so huge, it was an offer they couldn't refuse without getting dragged before the SEC to explain why they said no to a deal that would have provided such a wonderful windfall for their shareholders. And what are they supposed to say? The truth? Because the truth is, we think Donald Trump can't regain the White House without being back on Twitter, so we want to keep him the hell off Twitter. But this African-American guy with all his free speech mumbo-jumbo, we think he wants to reinstate Trump's account. And a former president being able to speak freely on the platform of his choice, well, that is an intolerable threat to our democracy. And they would be under oath, so they really would have to say something pretty close to that, assuming they care about solemn oaths, but you never can tell these days. Meanwhile, I guess we talk with some frequency around here about the fact that our friends on the left are not typically burdened with an overabundance of self-awareness or an overriding regard for maintaining a coherent political philosophy, so they do tend to do a lot of rather abrupt U-turns with the things they say and believe. And man, this Twitter thing, you want to talk about walking into a hypocrisy trap? You want to talk about inviting your opponents to mock you good and long and hard and righteously? Because do you remember these past couple of years, since Twitter and Facebook really started ramping up the political censorship? Whenever a libertarian or a conservative or a sensible liberal even would complain about it, the chorus of responses from the blue check mafia would be, hey, Twitter is a private company. It can have whatever content policies it likes. If you have a problem with it, then, well, just run along and go make your own Twitter. And oh my God, is it going to be fun throwing those words back in their faces. Sometimes it can be a pointless exercise throwing their words back in their faces because we know they're hypocrites and they don't give a toss about it. But in this case, I think the moaning and the wailing and the sheer unintentionally comic nature of the overreaction makes it a perfectly well-warranted response, and one that will bother them a great deal, which just makes it better. Because you know how you can tell somebody's a complete loser who takes Twitter far too seriously and probably should get a life and some normal relationships with other human beings? You can tell that when they publicly and very ostentatiously threaten to leave Twitter for good. Like that's the moment when you're supposed to say, whoa, hold on. Shit just got real. Leaving Twitter? Like for good? You make a threat like that, it's the same as standing on a freeway overpass and threatening to jump. In fact, I'm pretty sure the cops have a radio code for subject threatening to delete Twitter account. When that code goes out, it's like when an army unit radios Broken Arrow. Every squad car that can hear that call is going to descend on that scene like a bat out of hell, because clearly we have got a subject in extreme distress, and taking him down, getting him back to back away from that delete button, well, that is a delicate task. Far too difficult for one cop to handle alone. It could take hours, days even. But if we trust in each other and follow our training, I think we can convince this guy to stay on Twitter. But it's not just enough me believing it. I need all you fellas to believe it too. Because you lose focus for just 1 second, he might hit that delete button, and for the rest of your life, you gotta live with that each time you look in the mirror. And believe me, you don't want that. I lost a guy once, back in the day, before Twitter, when there was just ICQ and Yahoo Instant Messenger. I thought, hey, it's an easy call. I'll talk the guy down. He won't quit Yahoo. Bada bing, bada boom, you're home for supper. But I forgot to follow my training that night. And this guy, he deleted his Yahoo account. It was 20 years ago, and I live with it every day. Wondering how that guy's fantasy football team might have done if he'd kept that Yahoo account. You fellas, you don't want to live with something like that on your conscience. So let's all keep on our toes and watch each other's backs here. So yes, when you publicly threaten to leave Twitter, that makes me think leaving Twitter is the absolute last thing in the world that you really want to do in your heart of hearts. Why? Well, because if you really were so outraged about the ownership change that you felt impelled to self-banhammer your account, you wouldn't make big public threats. You would just do it. Shit, do I have to pay Nike a royalty now because I said that? Oh, and speaking of people self-banhammering, did you see the Greeniac climate cultist who offed himself with fire in front of the Supreme Court building? And I'm just checking here, but are we still pretending this climate cult stuff isn't a religion? Because it seems an awful lot like a weird, creepy sort of neo-pagan apocalyptic religious movement, like Jonestown without the purple drink. I'm not going to say Kool-Aid because I understand the Kool-Aid people are pretty touchy about that, and quick to point out that it was really some off-brand South American Kool-Aid imitation that they used at Jonestown. Also, I'm pretty sure the next headline I read that says "Guy immolates self for non-religious reasons" is going to be the first one. Now, some guy who said he was the fire guy's best friend issued a rather puzzling statement afterward in which he first announced this was not suicide, which is a strange way of describing an incident in which a guy douses himself with a flammable accelerant, lights his ass on fire, and then voluntarily stands there being barbecued. Because, am I wrong in thinking that really sounds a whole hell of a lot like suicide? Or am I just being pedantic again? The friend then goes on to explain that the guy who banhammered himself with fire was a Zen Buddhist monk, which I've always been curious about what the qualifications are for being a member of the clergy in a religion that styles itself as a quest for nothingness, but I digress. And the motivation for the non-suicidal self-banhammering with fire evidently was this man's to desire was, as the friend put it, to call attention to the climate crisis. And look, if your fun way of celebrating Earth Day is by dousing yourself in petrochemicals and playing Joan of Arc, it's probably safe to say you were not unduly burdened by rational thought. But it still would be nice to know, now that you have given your life for a cause, what the cause actually is. Saying the climate crisis doesn't help us get any closer to the answer. Because if you ask 100 climate crazies what they mean when they say the climate crisis, you're going to get 100 different answers, each more incoherent than the last. It would be a shame if this guy suffered from grandiose delusions of self-importance, but he probably did. He probably imagined that if he voluntarily went to his death in the most horrific way you can imagine, that people would say, wow, if this man believed so deeply in this thing, then it must be true. So tomorrow I'm going to go buy an electric car, and then I'll buy a wind-powered house, and then I'll purchase carbon offsets and spend my life planting lots of trees to make up for the litany of environmental sins I've committed in the past. In this guy's mind, all hopped up on false climate cult self-righteousness, that's probably the reaction he imagined millions of times over. As his face was melting and he breathed his last, I bet this guy was fully convinced he would go down in history as the man who saved the planet with his benevolent act of self-sacrifice. But in the actual event, give it 48 hours, it'll drop off the headlines. And for the rest of eternity, you're just an obscure factoid from the more depraved recesses of American history. Hey, you remember that fool who killed himself with fire that one time? That was pretty messed up, huh? So there you go, fire guy. There's your historical legacy. I hope it all was worth it. And, speaking of people with embarrassing historical legacies, President of the United States and semi-animated cadaver Joe Biden is in the news today, with unnamed sources stating that the president seems unprepared for this year's midterm elections and doesn't have much of an idea what's going on most of the time. Wow, you don't say. What a bombshell revelation that is. You mean the president with the 33% approval rating doesn't have vulnerable Democrats beating down his door, begging him to come give a stump speech on their behalf? And now you're saying he's prone to confusion? Our Joe Biden? The man with a mind like a steel trap? The man who can remember word for word every story his father told him in childhood? The man who's so light on his feet he can actually fall up a set of airplane stairs? The man who invented the political doctrine of true in and anashaba pressure? These leakers should be ashamed of themselves, running a good man's name through the mud like this. And I think little stripper grandbaby Biden probably agrees with me on that. And so does the Easter Bunny, and so does Corn Pop, because Corn Pop was a bad dude. And I'll shut up now. Thank you very much indeed for watching. See you Wednesday. Have a pleasant tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.